Welcome back, everybody, into Quick Chat. I am Josh McCarty from Bill's Chat in Built-in Buffalo. With me tonight is Stokes from Built-in Buffalo, and we are going to talk about everything that was discussed today at One Bills Drive as the Bills are preparing for their first regular season game against the Jets on Monday Night Football. And Stokes, we got some clarity on the position battles, and I thought the biggest news of the day was the announcement that Terrell Bernard would be the middle linebacker for the Buffalo Bills. And quite honestly, Stokes, my initial reaction was sometimes doing nothing is the best thing. Terrell Bernard got hurt a couple weeks ago. AJ Klein went out there and proved he wasn't the guy. Tyrell Dodson went out there and proved he wasn't the guy. And now this mystery box that's Terrell Bernard seems like the best idea of all.
Yeah, and maybe it's a situation where absence makes the heart grow fonder. Maybe his time away let us see how these other guys just aren't the right answer for this question. And he can't be much quote unquote worse than what we saw out there during the preseason. So I mean, you get nervous because he didn't have a lot of the reps that you would want a guy to have with all the ones and everything, but I think I hope it's going to turn out well, and I just hope he doesn't make a fool out of himself out there. I don't need him to be some sort of game breaker. Just want him to not make a fool out of himself.
I think that's the most important part of all of this too is they are surrounded by all-pro talent. I mean, maybe these guys aren't at the peak of their career, but you have two former all-pro safeties, a former all-pro cornerback, eventually an all-pro in Von Miller. You have some guys on the defensive line like Leonard Floyd, Puna Ford, Ed Oliver, Greg Rousseau, like and Matt Milano is a former all-pro who he's playing next to. So you don't need this guy to be the Batman on the defense. I do think there's a realistic possibility, Stokes, that eventually this job does go to Christian Kirksey once he's caught up to speed in the defense. But for now, I applaud the Bills for empowering Terrell Bernard to take this job. They are going to have much more of a coverage backer out there. Speaking of draft picks from last year, Stokes, the biggest surprise to me on the day of the depth chart release was the announcement that second year cornerback Christian Benford would be the cornerback two opposite Tre'Davious White all off season long. I have been saying I really wanted it to be anybody but Dane Jackson because we know what that Dane Jackson ceiling is. He's a decent player, but you're always left wanting more. The natural reaction was we want it to be the first round pick from last year, Kyer Elam. But Stokes, Christian Benford is just a guy that every time he gets an opportunity, he comes through. And I think at some point the Bills just couldn't deny what they were seeing.
Yeah, I think that naturally all of us wanted to see Kyrie Elam because he was the first round pick because he had all this stuff surrounding him. I think he won over like every fan in Bills Mafia with his interview and how he had all of his notes and everything. But quiet as it's kept, Benford has just outplayed him at every turn throughout their entire careers together. So it's one of those situations where we're not gonna, or they're not gonna just put him out there just to get roasted. They're gonna put out the best player because they're trying to win and win a Super Bowl right now. So it makes sense. He may not have the overall type of upside that Elam has, but he's better right now, and the Bills need to win right now. And I think that's a great decision because everything they're seeing day in and day out says that Benford is the better player right now. And I echo your sentiments regarding Dane Jackson. Like you know what his ceiling is, you know what his floor is. This is just he's just the guy that he's if things are going really really bad, Dane, we know what we got. And I think that's not what I would want out of our starting cornerback.
I want to run this by you, Stokes, because my interpretation of this is the pecking order at boundary cornerback, which is the outside spots. Taron Johnson obviously has the nickel spot locked up. Is Tre'Davious White, Christian Benford, Dane Jackson, then Kyer Elam. And then the other thing on the depth chart today was that Cam Lewis was listed as the second nickelback. So my read on the situation, Stokes, is when you look at what they're going to do on game days, I think we are heading toward a situation where Kyer Elam is going to be a game day inactive because when you get down to those cornerback four, it's not so much about what you can do on the defense. It's about what can you do in other areas of the game. And Cam Lewis is a guy that's a four-phase special teamer. He can back up safety. He can back up every defensive back spot on the field. And the Bills have told us he is their primary backup to Taron Johnson. where Kyer Elam is really just a boundary cornerback. And we already know that Dane Jackson would go in ahead of him should something happen to White or Benford. Am I nuts for thinking that last year's first round pick Elam could be in street clothes against the Jets?
I don't think that you're nuts. I do think that he's going to be out there just because I don't think that they will give him a healthy scratch. I just that's just something that I don't really see. But with everything you're saying, it's hard to it's hard to dispute any of that. You know, it's like when you have your three, four, five cornerbacks in if he's not going to make his way on the field, it's a waste of a roster spot when you're looking at it that way. And we don't want to think of it in that sense because we would rather have him out there. But it's always a numbers game. You got 46. Everyone has to have a role, and if he's never going to play, if he's not as good as he needs to be on special teams or able to play special teams, then he's probably not a player that we're going to see, and that's very unfortunate when you think about the bigger picture. But we may have struck gold with another pick from that draft class. So we have to change our minds to think about the pedigree of where he was drafted. That's just it's going to take some time. I mean, it's only year two, so he can still get better. He can still grow into whatever they would drafted him for. But if he's not that right now, that's just what it is.
I went back and looked last year to the Bills' tendencies, and there was only one game last year where they dressed four boundary corners. So if you remember, Tre'Davious White was out up until Thanksgiving. So their boundary cornerbacks they were dressing when healthy were Kyer Elam, Dane Jackson, and Christian Benford. When any of those guys were hurt, it was Xavier Rhodes coming in off the practice squad. Well, on Thanksgiving, Tre'Davious White came back, and all four of those guys were active. But it's important to note Tre'Davious White was on a very limited snap count. He only played one or two drives in that game, and then he was out of action the rest of the game by design. And then after that, there was the controversial decision in New England where Kyer Elam was a healthy scratch in favor of Rhodes, which was really my first breaking point of what is going on with our first round pick. So it's interesting to track. We will certainly keep an eye on that. But as Stokes mentioned, if they struck gold in the fifth round or sixth round with Benford and the first round pick doesn't end up being a star, that's still a good pick. There is precedent in Bills history for striking gold at the same position and later on in the draft. 2006, John McCargo in the first round, Kyle Williams in the fifth round. 2008, it was James Hardy, RIP, not piling on James Hardy in the second round, Stevie Johnson in the seventh round. So if it doesn't line up in the order you took them, but you still get a solid starter out of it, it's still a good draft. Speaking of good draft picks, Stokes, it certainly looks like Osiris Torrance to this point has done everything to impress the Bills because he was named the starting right guard by Sean McDermott today. What are your thoughts on Cybo getting that call?
I am very thrilled with that. I hope that they let him take every single snap. They let him make every mistake. As long as the mistake doesn't end in Josh Allen hurt, let him be out there for every single thing that he does good, bad, or indifferent because those reps are important. And I feel like he can be one of those guards that we look back on this like, wow, we got him in the second round. So I think it is very, very important for them to put him out there for every good and bad thing because he's going to go up against some really 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 great interior linemen, and there's no amount of experience you can get from those reps.
So every one of the three key position battles ended up going to a first or second year player in Bernard, Benford, or Torrance. Last year, a big point of frustration, a big narrative about this team was their hesitancy to play rookies and young players. But now, at least going into week one, looking at the last two drafts, the Bills have five starters out of those two classes when we're talking about Bernard, Benford, and James Cook from last year, and Torrance and Kincaid from this year. One guy we thought would be back week one, still probably tracking to do so, but at least there was some concern put out in the universe on Wednesday was safety Micah Hyde. Sean McDermott said he is dealing with a back injury. McDermott actually said at his press conference Hyde would not practice on Wednesday, but then he was out there at least in the individual portion, ditching things off the side, working on his back. There's no true practice designation on Wednesday because they play on Monday night. The first practice report will come out on Thursday, and we'll have to see what Hyde's designation is. Stokes, when the Bills signed Taylor Rapp, our reaction was, okay, this is a much better insurance policy than what they had in house last year. I don't think either one of us had our eyes on week one for when they had to cash in that insurance policy. But if Micah Hyde is unable to go, I do think the Bills are in an okay spot.
Yeah, I think with what he had been dealing with, the back injuries can be tricky. They're really difficult to gauge, and he had just come off a neck injury. So I feel like they're going to be super duper extra cautious when they're considering everything regarding him. So my expectation is that unless he's 100%. Or really close to 100%, they're going to err on the side of caution because Taylor Rapp, as you said, he's no slouch. He's better than what we had last year, and the defense was still pretty good. I just hope that between him and Poyer, they can develop the type of chemistry and rapport that Hyde and Poyer have. But I feel a little bit more comfortable having Rap out there. But of course, I really want Hyde out there just because it just seemed like he was really, really sad watching all the progress of last year, how things went with the Bills, and he felt or knew that he could have made a difference, and his body wasn't letting him. And just hopefully his back doesn't keep him from realizing all of those thoughts that he had last year.
It is worth noting Jordan Poyer did have a press conference today on Wednesday, whenever you're watching this Wednesday, and he said his expectation is Micah Hyde is going to play. Take that for what it's worth. He said there's no chance Micah Hyde's going to miss this game. Players say things a lot. It's usually up to the team doctors and the coaches. All right, Stokes, the $1,000,000 question, because Luca and I will give our thoughts on Bills Chat Live on Friday on Built in Buffalo. How are you feeling about this Jets matchup? Because we are just days away now, and I don't know when we'll hear from you again. I believe there's maybe a pregame show coming up on Built in Buffalo. We shall see. But as far as our airwaves go, what is your confidence level in these Bills heading into this Week 1 matchup?
Uh, it's cautious because the Jets defense had a really decent time of slowing down the Bills offense last year. So it makes me a little nervous because their offense is now presumably better. And then when you consider how they played the Bills last year as far as our offense went, you lend your thought to think the Jets are going to be in a better position to win the game. But I still feel like the Bills are going to win. It's just a matter of how we see that defense be disrupted as far as the Jets go. Because it looks like they upgraded at places and their corners are still really good. But I still feel like the Bills' offense is going to be difficult to stop. It's just a matter of what happens out there. So cautious is the best way I can describe it. But I'm not as confident as I was going into last year, I guess.
Is it a must-win game?
No. No, not at all. I don't feel like this is a must-win game. This is game one. There's going to be so much surrounding this game. There's going to be everything, all the hoopla regarding Rodgers and all that. I don't think this is a must-win game. It's an important game, of course. It's a divisional game, and with three other teams who seem like they have a pretty good idea of what they're doing. That these divisional games are not anything you want to sleep on, but I feel like the Bills could lose this game and be just as likely to rattle off 13, 14 wins.
It's going to be exciting to see what happens. Luca and I will be back on Friday night on Bill's Chat Live to talk all about it. And then Monday morning, our podcast will essentially be a pregame show for this Jets game. But if you're enjoying Bill's Chat Quick Chat, we have good news for you. Since we are now in the regular season rotation, we will be here every Wednesday just to give our midweek feel on this team. Normally, that will line up with the McDermott press conference and updated injuries from the game before. So we will obviously have that to chew on. And then I will obviously do a Stokes. I don't know why I said obviously again. I will do a Stokes temperature check on how he's feeling about that upcoming game. And then in a couple of weeks, we may have to do a Stokes temperature check about something major going on in his life. We'll get to that in a couple of weeks. And if he has to miss that episode, we will certainly understand. But we will be here every Wednesday night. While you are here, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps us out so much as we are trying to build this YouTube channel from the ground up For Stokes, I am Josh McCarty. I just pointed to the wrong person. For Stokes, there it is. Boom. I'm getting it's week one for everybody, Stokes.
Yep,
You got to
that's
knock
right.
the rust off. For Stokes, I am Josh McCarty. We will see you next time on Bill's Chat Quick Chat.